support measurements are complete and you've checked the diagonals, run a string line around the outside of the pins. The important part about the string line is that it needs to be nice and tight so that the line stays straight and high enough so that it won't touch the ground or any tiles below it. Pull it as tight as possible, but watch out for the pins that become loose or start to bend inward, as this can negatively impact your original measurements. Notch out the corner of one tile that will sit inside the corner of the string line. The pin will sit inside this notch. Then build your corner around the pin as shown here, with one full tile outside of the string. I'm in the warehouse today on a concrete floor. I can't nail into the floor, so I'm using this little prop to explain exactly how to pin into the corner tile. You just go 2 squares in on the outside, every 6 inches, which is every other square. Set nails in the middle hole with just a few taps of the mallet. Don't overdo it, or the nails may start to bend. The hammer drill has got a recessed tip on the bit so that it will hold the head of the nail easily. When you drill, just make sure to leave the pins up a little bit, half an inch or so. This is for 2 reasons. One is that you don't want the hammer drill bit to damage the tile. The other is just in case you need to pull these nails up. You can still get under them with a claw hammer or crowbar easily. We save finishing the nails until the very end of the project. Just a couple of taps should flush the nail heads with the surface of the tile. Once you have one corner secured this way, you can go build the other corners. The most important thing is to make sure that the orientation of the tiles is the same for all the corners. As soon as you have 2 adjacent corners secured, you can build the sidewalk between them. Just open up a box of tiles, take out 4 or 5 sheets, orient them in the right direction, slide each sheet off the top of your stack, making sure the male lock sits on the female loops. We find that's the easiest way to lay a lot of tiles quickly. Build the sidewalk on the inside of the string line. It is easier to slide the whole strip of tiles underneath the line all at once. Step the locks together with your feet. Sneakers are recommended over boots since you can feel the locks coming together more easily with softer soles. Attach the sidewalks to the corners. It usually makes sense to do this in 2 pieces, leaving a gap in the middle. On a hot day with lots of direct sunlight, there may not be a gap, and you can simply step the whole side together. If there's a small gap, you can usually jump or kick the tiles together using body weight, stretching them toward each other. Now is a good time to double check that you do have the right measurement from pin to pin. And what you're going to want to make sure is that it's 1 full linear foot from one pin to the other. Ideally, it should be a little bit more than a foot by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. It shouldn't be less than a foot. If this measurement was 14 feet 10 inches, that would be bad because the tiles would definitely buckle on a hot day. On a cold day, or overcast day, you might have to use the Mateflex rake system. This is pretty straightforward. You just put the teeth of the rake into the holes of the tiles. Keep the rake centered. The come along should go on the side with the loops because it'll be holding that side down. The other side's got to have a little bit of room to pull up. A lot of times it's easier with 2 people. One person standing on one side and another person standing on the other side operating the come along. But it is possible to do it as 1 person. Just make sure you have a little bit of weight on both of the rakes so they have a good grip on the tiles. And now you have 1 sidewalk attached. These rakes may also be used later if necessary in the same way to pull the inside tiles together. The next step, since you might have stretched one side further than the other, a good thing to do is to check that the tiles are evenly distributed. To do this, just make sure that the center seam of your tiles is where it should be, at a full linear foot. If it's not, you can kick the tiles a bit to make it so. Now you're pretty much ready to pin all the way down this side. You just have to make sure the tiles are straight along the string line. Nudge it with your feet to make sure that it is straight. Make sure that the string line isn't falling into a crack. Make sure that it's tight and free of obstructions. And once you're happy with the straightness of that side, just start pinning similar to how you did the corners, 1 nail every 6 inches. It's good to gently stand on top of the tiles to hold them in place, and check frequently that they are staying straight. And then typically we have 1 person setting the nails and another person coming behind to drill them. So there are a few different ways that tiles can be damaged, and these are usually pretty easy to fix. As you attach the floor together, you'll start to notice that you can see where the locks aren't fully engaged. Sometimes it's just that they didn't get stepped in fully. Other times, the tiles may actually be damaged by forcing them together incorrectly. Here's an example of a smashed lock that no longer fits into the loop. In this case, you just cut off the smashed piece of plastic to solve that problem. Another thing that you might encounter is a damaged loop, and if that loop is pushed to the side too much, the lock might not fit in nicely. In that kind of case, you either want to replace the tile or just bend the loop back until the lock can fully engage. Another pretty common thing for you to see is a broken lock like this. This is where the male lock tab flips up and it gets in between the two tiles. In this case, you're just going to flip it back down. Problem solved. Here, we'll see the special keel attachment that we have on a Douglas tape machine. This keel needs to be carefully adjusted for the height of it, which is how deep it is going into the groove. But once you find the sweet spot, this machine will follow the groove nicely. Give the tape a foot or two to straighten out when you first start. Adjust the machine so that the tape is not covering up that ridge of plastic there. You're going to want to paint on that ridge. To do a corner, just pre-cut the tape that's already down there so the keel doesn't rip through it. And again, give it a little space for the tape to straighten out. Run the machine with a nice, consistent, smooth motion. And that's what you want right there. If you do any hand taping, it's a good idea to roll the tapes before painting. Make sure they are adhering well to the tile surface. This is all pretty self-explanatory. It takes a little bit of practice, but the keel is nice to have on the Douglas machine for straight lines. You want to be sure to apply an approved plastic adhesion promoter prior to painting, otherwise the paint will not stick. The paint is a 2-part polyurethane paint, and it is important to follow the guidelines provided to ensure a quality paint job. Now the main thing with painting is you're going to want to try to keep a very light and consistent movement. You don't want to stop, go back and forth, or press too hard and end up wringing globs of paint into the tile. That will create a very uneven appearance. You can pull the tapes either wet or dry, but you'll likely have some cleanup or touch-ups with either method. What you're aiming for is a nice even coat on the tops of the tile. So this is the one. This is what you're aiming for, a nice even coat. As far as trimming a tile, you can sometimes easily just cut it right down the expansion joint with a utility knife. Custom cuts like circles around posts, you can do that easily with a utility knife. For straight cuts that aren't easily rounded off to an expansion joint, we use a bullet tile cutter like this. And you're going to want to give a trim a little bit of breathing room, but not too much, maybe 1/4 of an inch.